actually, once they got past their initial, I'm offended, and I'm like, okay, great, we'll deal with it. That's your emotion. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
Once they get past that initial, they go, actually, there's something in this. And I like to work with the body because these are states we can move in and out of. We're not saying men should be like this or women should be like that. We're saying these are ways of being, which you can flow with in the moment.
Yeah.
And you have more or less skill in moving between
Yes.
polarity. So there's times when I really want to go into the feminine, times when I really want to go into the masculine. And that ebbs and flows based on the day and the season and who I'm with and the relationship and all the rest of it. And I want skill within that movement.
Yes.
Not putting people in boxes. It's the opposite, right?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly the opposite. It's literally about, it is the ultimate in embodiment, which is to become skillful in all the feelings moving through you, not to deny or demonize any of them, be it anger or sexuality. They are all necessary biofuel. They've survived an evolutionary ladder for a reason. And I'm not surprised there's a ton of anger beneath the surface, because so many people are dissatisfied and repressed because the baby has been thrown out with the bathwater, rather than saying, we need to get more skillful with our behaviors. Instead, we've policed the energy altogether so that it's not allowed to stick its head up anywhere. I'll give a little example of that. So, obviously, I said charge is a masculine energy. So, in the Toltec tradition, so taking charge, whoever is taking charge is taking on the male role, and that's whether you're a man or a woman, because you're taking on the roles of sort of like guarding the boundary and providing direction and other things that would be traditionally masculine. But one of the things about charge is that people... I've lost my thread there because I went on a tangent. And I'm sorry, I've got my young baby is screaming in the background. They're talking about embodiment, and it just tickled my amygdala there and distracted me. I know my partner's dealing with it, but it just threw me off my thread there. I'm trying to so where were you again? And I'll pick my thread up again. What was it?
Let me talking about charge there.
Oh yeah.
Like boundaries is definitely an issue that I see in Sweden. People have struggled to say no. People have struggled to say no politically to large amounts of immigration that might not be so smart. There's a difficulty with boundaries here generally.
Yes. And again, that is another example of this throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So yes, and it reminded me what the other thing is on the charge thing. It's because people have ended up with boundary issues, not knowing, not understanding that because boundary was viewed to be all bad, people got rid of all boundaries and then started to realize, wait a minute, I'm feeling encroached upon. And I don't really understand why, because I've done the no boundary thing and I should feel all this beautiful oneness, shouldn't I? But actually, I'm feeling like you're a bit too close, or you're in my space, and actually, I need a boundary here. I need you to not be here, or I need space here. And people will end up realizing through the building up of charge in them, the fact that they're not happy, that they are going to need at least partial boundary. And the same happens with who's in charge. So what we find is, I found in certainly activism and the change movements in the UK, is that people have a real issue with authority. Because as soon as it looks like anybody is taking charge, people see it as power over, rather than an expression of competence to say, I can cover this bit, I can take charge of this because this is my expertise. And then when you're coming to your bit, I'm going to follow you and you take over there. But again, because we threw the baby out with the bathwater and we said all authority is bad, all charge is bad, because it's a reflection of that demonization of all masculine. So it's a charge energy. So therefore, that's all bad. And again, what we're now seeing is what happens when we bin all of that, which is, a lack of progress, a lack of movement. We see a rise in stagnation, a loss in ingenuity rather than an increase.
You can't have excellence. You can't have discernment.
No. Yes.
More appropriate or less appropriate. I teach an authority pose in Sweden around the yoga. And I was teaching this authority pose, and people were struggling with it. I said, guys, this isn't a democracy. Guys, we're equal here. We're equal as human beings.
Yeah.
We're rights, but we're not equal in terms of competence. You came to my class. And the difference between a dominance hierarchy and a competence hierarchy. And something else I'd love you to speak about, which is one of the main things I see missing in the sort of hard left that it takes on this point of view, is gratitude.
Yeah.
And why is gratitude missing when we throw out this kind of masculine element? That I think I've started to understand it from your work, but I'd love you to speak a little bit about the way men have constructed, or the masculine more generally has constructed systems and technology, and how the lack of gratitude is also related to this lack of this denial of masculinity.
It is. Well, because for the revisionist narrative of men being perpetual oppressors to stand, then it's almost like all the good of men has to be made invisible, or negated in some way, or presumed to be expected or entitled, which is, I think, where some of the ingratitude comes from. But also, we're just not seeing anything emphasized.
The good of men is to be ignored. You basically got
So the good of men has to be ignored if this revisionist narrative that men have always been oppressors is to be held to be true. If that is to be held to be true, then you can't be dragging up all these countless examples of benevolent goodwill of thousands and millions of men, because it would challenge that story that men have just been, forever raping and abusing and oppressing their wives and children, which patently, factually isn't true. But obviously the modern narrative wants to make it true. But anyway, what I've been doing recently is trying to help people see the gifts of the men, because obviously women are very proud of the obvious evidence that they carry the children of the next generation. So the gifts of the women are obvious to see in all of our existence. The fact that we're here, we all came from a woman. But when we're looking for the gifts of the men, all we hear in the press is this negative patriarchy or nasty, evil capitalism or corporatism, and we don't see the beautiful gifts. And I really did discover what I call the bubbling pool of goodwill that I think lives within masculinity. And I discovered it because one of the other things about the Toltec masculinity is that the masculine lives at the edge. That's where it should really, that's where it finds itself. That's where it lives. And it lives there on a micro and macro level. So you'll find the electromagnetic charge on the edge of cells or atoms are actually the masculine of that cell or that atom. And it's almost like the same for us. So when you look at our communities or our domiciles, that boundary where you would find the men patrolling, ready to take charge of whoever was coming through with, say, friend or foe, is a mirror of what happens in a cell, where if there's approaching nutrients, the electromagnetic energy on the edge of the cell says, are you fuel for the cell and do I let you in, or do we put up a barrier here and you don't get in? So that's where traditional masculinity kind of existed, and rites of passage and whatnot would be to go beyond the edge. And the Toltecs would say that men carry the spark, and this is really manifest in male sexuality, that they carry this charge, this pumped charge spark that's there for these short bursts to penetrate the unknown and to bring back new material or resource. And then once that spark is gone, it's as if it was never there. Once it's spent, it's just gone. But we have it for those short bursts. And it was when I was on one of these short bursts into the unknown that I discovered this thing. And because when we go beyond the edge, we are usually tested. We're tested to the limits of our resources, of our ingenuity, of our tools and our assets. And that's certainly what happened in the work I've been doing with men. And I discovered that all men, and in fact all people, do the same thing. It's just that it's about the masculine energy. So it's in women as well. But we all do this thing when we're beyond the edge. And it is a gift of the masculine because it's about discernment. And discernment is the positive face of discrimination. Yes. And that is a masculine thing, which is to form a boundary between ideas, to make a distinction between where one ends and another begins. And its positive form is, of course, discernment. So what we all do when we're pushed beyond the edge is, and we have an experience, is it's like, and I've never seen anybody not do this, where it's like, what can I do so that next time I can be safer, warmer, go longer, go deeper, do better? And it goes further than that, because I found that almost without exception, that we naturally extend this to others. It's what can I do so that those who come after me can do better, be warmer, be safer. And this is actually the seed and the spark that lies behind the innovation of all merchandise and consumerism, that's to make our life easier, to help us last longer, to do better, to be more skillful. And it's a masculine gift. And I discovered it where in a very odd place. And I realized that the men had done such a good job of codifying their gifts that we couldn't even see them anymore. And I realized, I used the example, I think you may have heard me say it before, but the example I like to use is a saw. So you or I now, we could go out. So basically the men codified their gifts in tools and processes and systems. And so I'll use that example of the saw. We can go out and we can spend £10 on a saw in a DIY store and it'll work. We'll get a good cut, a reasonable cut out of it. We'll get a good few straight cuts out of that saw. And we think it's as if the saw was a designed object, but it really wasn't. Everything from the materials, the alloy itself, the shape, the taper, the number of teeth, the angle of the teeth, how you sharpen them, the bumps on the handle, all of these are refinements made by thousands of people, often working in adverse conditions, in the elements, going, why is this thing stuck again? Why is it jammed? Why is it rusted? Why isn't it cutting? And then looking at the problems and what can I do so that those who come after me can do better, stay longer, cut sharper, and then make the modifications to the design. So that now, if we look at the saw, there's maybe, that's almost like having 10,000 ancestors' ingenuity in your hand. If you ask a Native American where the ancestors are, they would say, oh, they're in the rocks and the trees. And your average Westerner would go, eh? But I now really do see and experience the ancestors in the tools and the processes around me. The saw is like about 10,000 ancestor power in your hand. You imagine a drill. Anybody, barring physical disability, can go and drill 4 mil in concrete. I mean, this is an astonishing feat, and it's easy to dismiss. But
yes.
If you consider now that nothing has changed in 100,000 years, it takes as long now to go and build a fire from scratch as it did 100,000 years ago,
Yes.
without tools and processes gifted from our ancestors.
Yeah, I want to jump in, Darren.
Oh yeah, do.
I love this idea of being grateful for our ancestors.
Yes.
For those who kind of struggle with this stuff. And every time I see a radical third wave feminist bitching on an iPhone at me, I kind of want to say this. And it's interesting to me that Sweden and Netherlands, two of the most developed, safe, pleasant countries that haven't had famine in hundreds of years. It's where this conversation is going crazy. But then simultaneously, I really see a lead edge here. I've been having conversations with really wonderful men and women from the Netherlands and Sweden and Canada a little bit, and who are on that lead edge. And women who are saying to me, "I don't hate men." Women who are saying to me, I run a business. I'm a strong, confident woman, but I want to get back into that feminine side. Or blokes who are saying, "Listen, I'm a nice guy. I'm sensitive. I'm a liberal, but I want to get my balls back. There's some great men's work coming out." Yeah. So I want to kind of honor that lead edge, because I think some of them are listening, and I want to kind of nod to you guys. And and I think that points to the sort of last question really for you here, which is, what's the future of this? I mean, have we hit peak stupid? Is it going to get worse?
Yeah.
Or is the green shoots that I see in places like Scandinavia, is there sort of hope coming with this? What's the future of this?
Good question. I think we are in the largest period of, I suppose, ideological natural selection that our species has ever been across. I think the future is very, very bright for some and very, very bleak for others. And it just depends on how we survive the tests to our wit and reason that some of these ideas are giving us. Because I do feel like it's almost like there's a legal maxim that gets encapsulated as buyer beware, but the older maxim that it comes from, the Latin translation is, let he who will be deceived be deceived. And this stands in court, and it's what allows people who produce faulty goods or whatnot to get away with it, is because if the buyer buys it, then more fool them, sort of thing.